The Alpha King's war beast knelt before a poor girl. The pack went silent. The forest was alive with a quiet that felt unnatural. Snow had fallen the night before, covering the gnarled roots and jagged rocks in a thick, unbroken blanket of white. Every step Lyra took sank slightly into the frost, and each breath came out in small clouds that disappeared into the cold air. She had always loved the forest, even when it frightened her. Here she could be herself, free from the judgmental eyes of the village. Lyra was small and thin, her hands rough from work, and her clothes patched in several places, yet her eyes burned with a stubborn light. People whispered she was poor, unremarkable, but she knew she carried something they could never see, a gift, she thought, though she had never truly understood it. When the wind moved, she sometimes felt it speak to her. When the shadows shifted, she sensed their secrets. She kept it hidden, though, for fear of being labeled different or worse. That morning she wandered deeper than usual. The trees grew older here, their trunks wide and twisted, their branches heavy with ice. She had come to gather herbs rumored to cure frostbite, hoping to trade them for a loaf of bread. Her basket swung against her side as she picked carefully among the frozen plants. A sudden growl froze her in place. Not the growl of a wolf or a bear. This was heavier, deeper, full of power and danger. Her pulse raced. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. Then she saw him. He stood taller than any man she had ever seen, his form dark and massive, his eyes glinting like amber fire. But it was not just his size that struck her. It was the shape he carried. His body was partly wolf, partly man, his fur bristling and dark, his claws digging into the frozen ground. He was the war beast of the Alpha King, the creature the villagers feared even more than the man himself. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. The forest seemed to still around them. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind hesitated. And then, unexpectedly, the beast knelt. Her eyes widened. He lowered his head slowly, deliberately, so that his eyes were almost level with hers. The pack had trained him to obey only the Alpha. But Lyra was no Alpha, no king, no queen. She was only a poor girl. Yet here he was, bowing, showing a deference no one else had ever seen. "Why?" she whispered, almost to herself. The beast's gaze held hers, deep and ancient, filled with something she could not name. Fear, respect, recognition. A strange pull tugged at her chest. And then, in a voice that was rough and low, yet unmistakably human, he spoke. "You?" he said, his words seeming to vibrate through the trees. "You are the one." Lyra staggered back, gripping the basket to steady herself. I don't understand." The beast shifted slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a strange intensity in his presence, a weight that made the forest feel smaller, as if the trees themselves leaned in to watch. "You do not know me," he said. "But I see you. I kneel because the bond calls me." The words made little sense, but Lyra felt them deep inside her. A shiver ran down her spine, not entirely from the cold. She sensed something ancient stirring, a thread between her and this creature, this man. And then the forest erupted with sound. A chorus of howls rose, echoing through the trees. Wolves from the pack had gathered silently, watching from the shadows. They circled the clearing, their eyes glinting in the pale light. Every head turned toward the kneeling war beast and the girl in the snow. And then, silence. The pack went still, as if waiting for a command, or perhaps waiting for a miracle. Lyra's heart pounded. She had never been in the presence of such raw power before, and yet she felt a strange calm in the midst of it. She stepped forward, drawn almost irresistibly toward the beast. You are not like the others," she said softly. "Why are you kneeling?" The beast's amber eyes softened, just slightly. "Because I am bound to you," he said. "Even if I do not fully understand why, my strength, my fury, they are yours." Lyra's mind raced. She had heard tales of the Alpha King's war beast, a creature that had never shown weakness, never bowed, never hesitated, and yet here it was, humbling itself before her. The villagers had whispered of a curse that bound the Alpha to darkness, a curse that no ordinary human could break. Could it be that she...
And ordinary poor girl was meant to touch that darkness in a way no one else could?
She reached out, trembling, and placed a hand against the cold fur of the beast's shoulder. His body was warm beneath her touch, alive and dangerous, yet he did not move away. Instead, he lowered his head further until his muzzle brushed the top of her hand. "You will need to be careful," he warned, his voice low. "The bond. It can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. Others will not understand. The pack, the world. They will not see this as a gift." Lyra swallowed hard. "I don't care what they think. I think I can help you." The beast's eyes seemed to study her, searching for something beyond the surface. And then, without another word, he rose, towering over her once more. The moment he moved, the air seemed to shimmer around him. She could feel the pulse of his power, the weight of it pressing into her bones. Before she could ask more, a shadow moved through the trees. Faster than she could see, something or someone emerged from the forest. Lyra tensed, instinctively stepping behind the beast. It was another figure, cloaked in black, with eyes that gleamed with malice. "You dare touch him?" the figure hissed. "Do you know what you are meddling with?" The war beast growled, low and rumbling, his body shifting, fur bristling. He stepped protectively in front of Lyra. "She is no meddler," he said, his voice cutting through the cold air like a blade. "She is the one I have been waiting for," the figure faltered, then vanished into the trees with a sound like snapping twigs. Lyra's heart raced. The forest seemed to exhale, returning to an uneasy quiet. The pack watched from the shadows, still silent, still waiting. Lyra looked up at the war beast, her hand still trembling on his shoulder. "What was that?" she asked. The beast lowered his gaze, almost sorrowful. "A warning! You are tied to me now! There are forces in this world that will not forgive this bond, and I cannot protect you from all of them." Lyra felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. Her life had always been small, ordinary, filled with struggles that seemed endless. But standing here, facing the Alpha's war beast, she felt something stir inside her. Something wild, daring, and powerful. She was no longer just a poor girl. Somehow, she was chosen. Somehow, fate had pulled her into a world she had never imagined. I will not be afraid," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. "If the bond is real, then I will face it." The war beast tilted his head, and for the first time a hint of something almost human softened his feral expression. "Very well," he said. "But understand this. The path ahead is not gentle. The pack will judge. The kingdom will fear. And the shadows that haunt me will come for you as well." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. She had always known life was hard, but she had never known it could be this immense, this terrifying, this filled with magic and destiny. The forest fell silent once more. Snow drifted lazily from the branches, settling on the war beast's dark fur. Lyra shivered, not entirely from the cold. She knew in that quiet moment that her life would never be the same again, that she was now tied to a creature of power, of legend, of fear, and that she could never go back to the small, safe world she had known. And then the war beast spoke again, a whisper that seemed to echo through the trees and into her very soul. "Prepare yourself, Lyra. Tomorrow the pack will see. And they will not be silent forever." For the first time, she understood the weight of her choice. She had stepped into a story far larger than herself, one of kings and curses, of beasts and bonds, of fear and redemption. And somewhere, Deep inside, a spark of excitement flickered, because she had a feeling that, despite the danger, she was ready. The forest swallowed their forms as night crept closer. Lyra stood beside the kneeling war beast, the first snow of morning reflecting off his dark fur. And somewhere in the distance, the pack howled, an echo of curiosity, fear, and awe. Lyra's heart raced. The world had shifted. The story had begun. The snow had melted slightly by the time Lyra reached the Alpha's keep. Towering black stone walls rose from the cliff like frozen teeth, jagged and imposing against the gray sky. Smoke curled from tall chimneys, the scent of wood and iron filling the air. Lyra had never seen a place so large, so alive with silent authority, and yet it pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Beside her, the war beast. Cale walked with a grace that belied his massive size. His fur, dark as midnight, shimmered faintly in the weak sunlight, and his amber eyes never left her. She wondered, not for the first time, how a creature so fierce could kneel to her in the forest. Now, as they passed through the keep's massive gates, the silence of the guards and the pack waiting within struck her. Even here, Cale commanded obedience, but she sensed a tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were aware that something extraordinary had arrived. Inside the keep, torches flickered against stone walls carved with scenes of battles long past. The air smelled of iron and smoke, heavy with the weight of power. Lyra's small footsteps echoed unnaturally in the hall, reminding her she was an intruder in a place built for kings and warriors, not for poor girls who picked herbs in the forest. Cale guided her to a room overlooking the valley below. He transformed back to his human form, tall, broad, with hair as dark as his fur and eyes that still glimmered amber even without the beastly shape. Lyra couldn't help but notice the tension in his shoulders, the way he carried a constant weight as though the very air pressed down on him. "You must understand," Cale said quietly, his voice low and steady. "What you saw in the forest was not just obedience. The bond, it is ancient, older than my rule, older than the pack itself. You are chosen, Lyra. Chosen in a way I do not fully understand, but my strength answers to you now." Lyra shivered. "Chosen? Me?"
I'm just a poor girl. I've done nothing remarkable."
Cale's gaze softened almost painfully. "You underestimate yourself. That is why the bond called to you. It seeks courage, not wealth. It seeks spirit, not title. And you have more spirit than anyone in this keep, even me." Lyra looked down at her hands, rough and calloused from years of work. "But the pack, they will hate me. They will never accept me." Cale's expression darkened. "Perhaps. They will fear you, yes. And envy you. But the bond does not care for fear or envy. It is neither weak nor cruel. It simply demands truth. And that is what I sense in you." Her chest tightened. She had always felt invisible, small, powerless. Now someone as terrifying and magnificent as KL was saying she mattered. It was overwhelming, almost too much to bear. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of hope flickered. Over the next days, Lyra was escorted through the keep. The soldiers and guards gave her wary glances, whispers following her like shadows. Some were curious, some were suspicious, and others outright feared her. But Cale's presence beside her silenced most questions. When he walked in his beast form, even the boldest soldiers bowed instinctively. Yet when she walked with him, it was different. She was not a servant nor a pawn. She was his equal in some strange, unspoken way. Cale began teaching her the ways of the pack, not how to fight, but how to understand them, how their strength worked, how the bond between alpha and warrior shaped everything, how loyalty could be earned and broken. Lyra listened, absorbing every word, and Cale in turn found himself watching her in ways he had never allowed before. Her defiance, her bravery, her refusal to simply obey drew him to her more than he wanted to admit. One evening, after a long day of lessons, Lyra wandered onto a balcony overlooking the valley. The moon had risen, painting the snow with silver light. Cale joined her, silent at first, his presence behind her both comforting and unnerving. "You are thinking too much," he said finally, a trace of amusement in his voice. "About the bond. About the pack. About what the world will say. I can't help it, Lyra replied. Everything is so different now. I don't know what I am or what I'm supposed to do. I only know I feel something I've never felt before. Kale's amber eyes softened. That is the bond. It awakens emotions you never knew existed. It awakens fear, yes, but also courage, desire, hope, and perhaps even love. Lyra turned to look at him, startled. Love? She whispered. He nodded, slowly, almost reluctantly. Even I did not expect this. The bond does not simply bind strength. It binds souls. And once it binds, you cannot deny it, no matter how hard you try. The wind howled through the mountains, and Lyra felt it in her bones. A warning, a promise, a premonition. She did not know if she was ready for what lay ahead, but she knew she could not turn back. Not now, not after the forest had called her, after the beast had knelt before her, after Kale had shown her that she was more than she had ever believed. As they spoke, a sudden sound came from the great hall below, a commotion, sharp and urgent. Kale stiffened, his hand brushing hers instinctively. They grow restless, he said, his voice low. Some will never accept this bond. Some will see it as weakness or betrayal. Lyra's heart raced. But I thought the pack, they trust you! They obey you! They obey, Kale said, his jaw tightening. But obedience is not always loyalty. Fear is not always respect. And now, this bond will test them in ways they are unprepared for. The commotion grew louder. From the balcony, Lyra could see figures moving through the halls, guards hurrying, whispers spilling like fire. She felt the tension in the air, heavy and oppressive, pressing down on her like snow before a storm. Kale's hand gripped hers, firm and unyielding. Stay close to me, he instructed. Whatever comes, you are mine to protect. But know this, protection is not always enough. You will need courage. And perhaps sacrifice. Lyra nodded, even as fear curled in her chest. She had never imagined a life like this, filled with kings and curses, with creatures of power and whispers of ancient magic. And yet, beneath the fear, she felt something else. A thrill, a calling, a certainty that she was where she was meant to be. The next morning brought even greater challenges. The Alpha's council had convened and Lyra was brought before them. Elders, warriors, and leaders of the pack eyed her with suspicion, some with thinly veiled anger. Whispers followed her like shadows. Who is this girl? Demanded one of the council, a warrior with a scar across his cheek. Why does the Alpha show her favor? Does he not see the danger? Does he not see that she is nothing? Kale stepped forward, towering and unflinching. She is the bond, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. She is chosen, and her place is here, with me. The council erupted in murmurs, some muttering, some outright shouting. Lyra felt every pair of eyes on her, and yet she did not retreat. She stood tall, her small hands gripping the edges of her cloak, her gaze steady on Kale. You speak of choice, she said, her voice trembling slightly, yet firm. But what I see is fear. I am not here to challenge the pack or the Alpha. I am here to understand, to help, if you will let me. For a moment, silence fell. Even the gods seemed to hold their breath. Kale's gaze met hers, and she felt the connection pulse stronger than ever. A thread that tied their fates together. Unbreakable and fierce. Finally, the council spoke. We will see, one of the elders said cautiously. But know this, any who defy tradition risk everything. You, girl, and even you, Alpha. Lyra nodded. I understand. And yet, as she left the council chamber with Kale, she felt the weight of their eyes, the weight of suspicion pressing down on her like snow. The bond was not just a connection, it was a challenge. And the pack, though silent now, would not remain so for long. That night, Kale and Lyra walked the ramparts in silence. The wind bit at their faces, carrying the distant howls of wolves and the faint hum of the forest. Lyra's thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, awe, and curiosity. "Kale," she whispered, "what if they never accept me?" Kale's hand brushed hers, steadying and warm. "Then we will face them. Together! The bond is stronger than fear, stronger than tradition. But you must be ready for resistance, for challenge, for danger beyond what you have imagined." Lyra nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She was no longer a girl who hid in the shadows of the forest. She was bound to a king, to a beast, to a destiny that stretched far beyond her small life. And as the moonlight fell upon them, painting Kale's dark features in silver, Lyra realized that the path ahead was not just one of survival. It was a path of courage, of power, of awakening, and of love that neither of them fully understood yet. But deep in the keep, shadows stirred. Whispers that had been silent for decades began to move. Eyes watched from corners and cracks. And one thing became certain: the bond between Kale and Lyra had set forces in motion that would not rest. The Alpha King's war beast had knelt before a poor girl. The pack had gone silent once before. This time, silence would not hold. The first light of dawn filtered through the tall, frozen windows of the Alpha's keep. Snow still clung to the outer walls, casting pale reflections on the polished stone floors. Lyra stood at the edge of the training yard, her hands cold but steady. She had never imagined herself here, beneath the gaze of warriors, beneath the shadow of a king who could transform into a beast. And yet, she was here, not as a prisoner, not as a curiosity, but as something far more dangerous, as a chosen force bound to Kale, the Alpha King. Kale stood beside her, tall and unwavering, his human form radiating authority even without the beastly shape he sometimes wore. The warriors of the pack trained silently in the yard, swords and axes flashing under the morning sun. Their eyes, sharp and suspicious, occasionally flicked toward Lyra. Some watched her with curiosity, others with contempt. A few whispered that she was unworthy. And still, she held her place, her chest straight, her gaze forward. "Today," Kale said, his voice cutting through the morning chill, "you learn not only to survive among them, but to understand them. The bond is more than magic. It is recognition, respect, and trust. You must earn it as much as they must accept it." Lyra nodded. She had already felt the weight of the pack's eyes, the unspoken judgment in their stance, the power that Kale commanded over them. And yet, she knew that the true challenge was not their acceptance, it was understanding the bond itself. Why had the war beast knelt before her? Why had Kale? The answer was hidden somewhere deep within their connection, a thread she could feel pulling tighter every day. Kale gestured toward the yard.
Observe first. Do not act without thought.
You are part of this, but you are not the Alpha. Lyra's eyes followed the movements of the warriors. They were precise, disciplined, and relentless. Their strength was raw, honed by years of obedience and battle. She felt a pang of doubt. Could she ever belong here? Could she ever match their strength, their loyalty? Kale must have sensed her hesitation. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. Strength is not only in muscle or blade. The bond gives you insight, intuition, understanding. Watch carefully and you will see more than they do. Hours passed as she observed. She learned the patterns of movement, the discipline behind each strike, the unspoken communication among the warriors. She noticed small details, the hesitation of one, the fear in another, the flicker of respect when Kale nodded to a skilled fighter. Slowly, she began to understand the rhythm of the pack, the invisible threads that tied them together. After the training, Kale led her to a quiet courtyard where snow had yet to melt. The trees here were older, taller, their branches heavy with frost. Here, away from the eyes of the pack, Kale shifted into his beast form. Lyra watched with a mixture of awe and fear as the war beast's fur shimmered in the pale light, his amber eyes locking onto hers. "You must learn to see me as both," he said. The beast is not just strength. It is fear, instinct, and fury. The man is not just reason. It is judgment, pain, and memory. Both must be understood, and both will test you. Lyra nodded. I will try, she said, her voice firm. I don't know how, but I will. Call's eyes softened just for a moment. That is all I ask. Courage does not come from certainty. It comes from persistence. Days turned into weeks. Lyra trained, observed, and slowly became part of the rhythm of the keep. The pack began to watch her not with suspicion alone, but with wary interest. They could see that Cale's loyalty had shifted. He defended her in ways he had never defended anyone else. Death to the turncoat, he did not simply obey tradition. He acted with the bond guiding him. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Lyra found herself alone with Cale in the library. The room was quiet except for the crackle of the fireplace. Shelves of ancient texts, scrolls, and records lined the walls. Cale's hands brushed over the spines, finally stopping at a heavy leather-bound tome. This, he said, opening it carefully, contains the history of my line, the curse that binds the Alpha, and the prophecy tied to the Chosen One. Lyra leaned closer, curiosity and fear mingling in her chest. A prophecy? Cale nodded. It speaks of one who will awaken the bond, who will either save or destroy the Alpha. That is why the war beast knelt before you! That is why the pack will struggle against your presence! Your arrival was never meant to be simple, Lyra's heart pounded. Destroy or save. That sounds terrible. Cale's eyes were distant, haunted. It is both terrifying and true. My strength, my curse, my mistakes, they are all linked. Only someone pure of heart, courageous in spirit, can guide me through what is to come. That is you. Lyra's fingers brushed the pages of the book. She felt a shiver of recognition, a spark that connected her to the words. The prophecy was not just history. It was a warning, a guide, and a challenge. And the challenge was hers alone. The following night, a storm raged over the keep. Wind tore at the stone walls, and snow fell like silver daggers against the windows. Lyra could not sleep. She wandered the halls, her footsteps echoing softly. She found Cale on the ramparts, staring into the night. Even in human form, he seemed as large and imposing as the war beast. You are thinking of the prophecy, he said without turning. I am, Lyra admitted. And I don't know if I am ready. I don't know if I can save you or if I will make it worse. Cale turned to her, amber eyes glowing even in the dark.
Lyra, it is not about being ready.
It is about choosing. The bond does not wait for readiness. It demands courage. And courage is not absence of fear. It is action despite it. Lyra swallowed. I will And know this, the pack will test you. They will try to break your resolve, to question your place, to shake your connection with me. You must stand strong. Not for me, but for yourself. The storm raged through the night, but Lyra did not move. She stood beside Cale, feeling the bond pulse stronger than ever. It was no longer simply curiosity, awe, or fear. It was recognition, understanding, and a strange, unspoken trust. In the following days, the tension in the keep grew. The pack whispered behind closed doors. Some warriors attempted to challenge her in subtle ways, testing her courage, her wit, and her ability to endure. Kale intervened when necessary, but he allowed the challenges to teach her as well. Each confrontation, each test strengthened her. Each glance, each word, each shared silence with Kale deepened their bond. One evening, as the first stars appeared, Lyra sat with Kale in the courtyard. The snow had melted into puddles, reflecting the faint light. She could see in his eyes the burden he carried, the weight of kingship, of battles, of the beast within him. "Kale," she said softly, "do you ever wish it could be different? That you didn't have this curse, this power, all this responsibility?"
He looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his strong features.
"Every day. But then, I would not have met you, and without you, I do not know if I could endure it. The bond, it is both my burden and my salvation." Lyra's heart tightened. "And if the pack never accepts me?" Kale's hand brushed hers. "Then we will face them. Together! And if enemies rise, together as well." The bond protects us, yes, but it also challenges us. It is never simple. And it is never safe. She nodded, feeling the truth of his words. Danger was never far. The prophecy, the curse, the pack's suspicion, they were all reminders that her journey was only beginning. And then, as if to underline the warning, a distant howl echoed through the forest. Not a wolf, but something darker, something ancient. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. Kale stiffened beside her, his jaw tight. "They know," he whispered. "Whatever is coming, they know we are united." "And they will not rest until the bond is broken." Lyra's hand found his, squeezing it instinctively. "Then we face it," she said firmly. "Together!" Kale's amber eyes met hers, fierce and unwavering.
Yes, he said. Together.
"But be warned. The darkness we face is unlike anything you have ever imagined. It will test us in ways that may leave us broken." Lyra felt a thrill of fear and determination swirl inside her. She had stepped into a world of kings, curses, and creatures beyond human understanding. She had been chosen, bound, and challenged, and she knew deep in her soul that the path ahead would demand everything of her. The night deepened, the wind howling across the courtyard, carrying with it whispers of shadow and warning. Somewhere beyond the mountains, unseen forces stirred. And in the keep, two hearts, bound by fate and courage, braced for the storm that would soon descend. The Alpha King's war beast had knelt before her. The bond had awakened. And now? The world would test them both. The morning air was sharp, filled with the scent of snow, pine, and distant rain. The keep was quiet, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lyra stood on the ramparts, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, eyes scanning the distant forest. She felt the weight of the bond stronger than ever, the pulse of Kale's presence next to her steadying her heart. Kale's amber eyes glimmered with a mixture of determination and caution. His hand brushed against hers, a silent reassurance. They had trained, observed, and grown together, but the test ahead was unlike anything they had faced before. The dark forces that had stirred in the forest weeks ago were moving closer, drawn by the bond that tied them together. "We will not fail," Kale said, his voice low but firm. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Lyra nodded, feeling courage stir in her chest. "I am ready," she said. "I don't know what will happen, but I will stand with you." The first movement came like a shadow across the trees, a dark, swirling form that seemed to absorb light, moving faster than any human or beast could. Lyra's heart thumped as she recognized the shape, a wraith from the ancient forest, one that whispered of forgotten curses and vengeance. Its eyes glowed red, its voice like wind over broken glass. "You are bound," it hissed, "and that bond will be your undoing. The Alpha will fall and the girl will burn with him." Kale shifted into his war beast form, towering and fearsome, Fur bristling, claws digging into the stone, he growled, a sound that shook the keep. "You will not touch her," he said, the words vibrating through the cold air. "The bond protects us, and we are stronger than you know." Lyra stepped forward, her hand brushing Kale's fur. "We face it together," she said. The connection between them pulsed stronger than ever, as if their courage and trust were a shield against the darkness. The wraith lunged, moving like smoke and shadow, and Kale leaped forward, his speed and strength unmatched. Lyra followed, guided by instinct, her heart synced with his. The world around them blurred, snow, trees, stone walls, and only the bond kept them anchored. Kale struck first, powerful blows that shattered the air, but the wraith twisted and shifted, avoiding direct contact. Its laughter was cold, cruel. "You cannot escape me," it hissed. "The bond is a trap. The chosen will fall." Lyra felt a surge of fear, but she refused to retreat. Instead, she focused on the connection, the invisible thread between her and Kale. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat, the pulse of his strength, the echo of the beast within him. In that instant, she realized something profound. The bond was not just magic. It was trust, courage, and love, a force stronger than any curse. Opening her eyes, she called out, "We are not afraid!" Kale's amber eyes met hers, and together they moved as one. Their combined presence pushed the wraith back, its shadowy form recoiling from the unity of their bond. Every strike, every movement was guided by trust, by connection, by the shared strength that no darkness could sever. Suddenly, the wraith shifted, forming a mirror of Kale, his beastly form twisted and corrupted, filled with rage and power. It lunged at Lyra, and for a moment she faltered, heart hammering. But Kale's voice rang clear, steady, and commanding. "Trust me!" he roared. Lyra braced herself, and the bond surged like fire between them. Together they struck, their combined strength breaking the wraith's form into fragments of shadow that scattered into the wind. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension lifting, though the air remained heavy with magic. Kale lowered himself to human form beside Lyra, his chest heaving. "You were remarkable," he said softly, his voice a mix of awe and gratitude. "Without you, I could not have held the bond strong enough to defeat it." Lyra's hands trembled slightly, but she smiled. "We did it! Together!" Kale reached for her hand, his eyes searching hers. "There is more yet to come. The curse is not fully broken, but the bond is now stronger than ever. And together we can face whatever remains." Over the next days, the keep returned to its rhythm. The whispers of the events in the forest spread like wildfire. The pack watched Lyra differently now, not merely as a poor girl, but as someone who had stood beside the Alpha, faced a dark force, and survived. Respect replaced suspicion in some eyes, fear in others, but the tension eased. Kale and Lyra spent time together in the library, the training yards, and the courtyards. Slowly, he shared his past, the battles, the lives lost under his command, the mistakes he had carried for years. Lyra listened without judgment, her presence a balm to his wounded soul. He, in turn, learned from her courage, her compassion, her ability to see beyond the beast, beyond the crown, beyond the curse. One evening, the sky was painted in fiery hues of sunset. Lyra and Kale stood on the highest tower overlooking the valley. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, and the distant howl of wolves reminded them that the pack's world continued beyond the keep. "Kale," Lyra said softly, "do you think it will ever truly end?" "The curse? The dangers? The shadows?" Kale took her hand, amber eyes steady on the horizon. "Perhaps not entirely. Darkness is always part of the world. But it does not control us. We control how we respond, how we act, how we choose to face it. That is what the bond has taught us. That is what it will always teach us." Lyra squeezed his hand. "Then we face it, together." Kale's lips curved into a faint, rare smile. "Together!" The pack gathered below, warriors watching from the courtyards and halls. For the first time, they did not whisper. They did not question. They did not resist. They observed in silence, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had changed everything. Even the elders, who had once doubted her, now looked on with quiet respect. Cale lowered himself to his knees, not in submission, but in recognition of the bond they shared. Lyra knelt beside him, placing a hand over his. The moment was not about power or dominance, but about unity, courage, and trust. The entire keep seemed to hold its breath, witnessing a transformation that was more than magic. It was redemption. It was acceptance. It was love. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the stone towers. Lyra leaned her head against Cale's shoulder, feeling the warmth and steady pulse of his heart. She realized then that their journey was far from over. Challenges would come, darkness would rise again, and the bond would be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. But in that moment, there was peace. They had faced the shadows, confronted the curse, and survived. They had found trust, courage, and the strength to stand together. And as night fell, the first stars appearing in the sky, Lyra understood something she had never known before. She was no longer a poor girl at the edge of the forest. She was part of a legend, part of a bond that could not be broken, part of a story that would be told for generations. Cale looked down at her, amber eyes soft in the starlight. We have come far, Lyra. And yet, we are only beginning, Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of their shared journey in her chest. Then let's face the future together. The wind swept through the towers and across the snow-covered keep. Somewhere in the forest, a wolf howled, a signal, a reminder that the world was vast, filled with challenges yet to come. And yet, Lyra and Cale stood hand in hand, united, unbroken, ready to face whatever the darkness might bring. The Alpha King's war beast had knelt before a poor girl. The pack had gone silent. And now the bond between them burned brighter than any curse, stronger than any shadow, unyielding as the mountains themselves. Together, they walked into the night,